Hi, pretty little lifters. Welcome back to the podcast. I am joined today by Jessica Miller. We met at a CrossFit gym that we were both going to, and I found out she was a Harvard graduate and she was also in education and teaching wellness. And I was kind of fascinated by this because she was going to be leaving and going abroad, and I didn't know any educators who were leaving the States to go teach wellness in other countries. So I wanted to talk to her on here and kind of get the inside scoop on what that was like for her and how she kind of made that decision to go, do that in other countries. So welcome to the podcast, Jessica.
Thank you, Tiffany. It's so great to chat with you after not seeing you for years.
I know. The last time we talked, it was probably, was it during the pandemic and we did like a Zoom call or like right when things,
I feel like the pandemic kind of went on forever here. So it could have definitely been through that. But I haven't seen you in person in what, 7 years? Probably 7, 8 years.
It's been wild. So yeah, we went to the same CrossFit gym, and then in the intro I was talking about how I, found out that you were a teacher. So could you give us a little background on like a little brief recap of like what you're up to, who you are, all that good stuff?
Yeah. So, well, when we met, I was actually embarking on kind of my first experience teaching like fitness and health in education. My background was previously as an English teacher, but I'm currently now teaching middle school health and wellness in Lima, Peru, where I've been for about the past 6 years. And I am getting ready to move to Shanghai, China, to do the same role, but at kind of a bigger, more established school. So I'm really excited about that.
That is wild to me, especially I feel like teachers, a lot of us in the States, it's like we just think, okay, we're teaching to work here in the States. So I remember when you told me like, yeah, I'm an English teacher, but I'm going into like wellness and fitness. And I was like, first of all, I was like, you're perfect for this. I was like, this is a perfect, because I know how much you prioritize health and wellness in your own life. And I was just like, oh my gosh, but you're going abroad. Like, for somebody who's so like, I just teach in the same state, I was like, wow, this is so interesting. And also, I didn't realize that you've been in Peru for 6 years now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's pretty long. It's actually one of the longest places I've ever lived in my life. So it really does feel like home. It'll be a tough move, I think, when I leave.
That's wild. Did you know Spanish before you moved there?
I studied in high school, and then I had spent some time in Latin America, like Ecuador, Colombia, traveling around for about a year, maybe earlier 2000s. And so, but when I came here, I really tried to immerse myself as much as possible. I felt like one of the most important things for me was to build my fluency. Some people speak English here, but I just find like to connect with others, connect with the culture, make friends that don't speak English. It's so important to me to develop my Spanish skills. So I use them often, which has been really fun.
That's so awesome. I even feel like you're helping me brush up on my Spanish skills, because when I watch your Instagram stories, sometimes you'll repost stories of Instagram accounts that are sharing news in Spanish. And so I'll be like, oh, like I need to read this and like practice my Spanish. So in a way, it's helping me with my Spanish too, which I appreciate.
Yeah, it's really cool to see different influencers from different parts of the world, kind of, some sharing similar messages and how they're cultural based or country based. So it's really cool to see those pockets all over the world.
Yeah. So you were sharing that you were formerly an English teacher and then you got really into health and fitness. So how did this come about? Can you share your kind of fitness story of like how you made that transition? Because as you know, that's what I did too. I was a multiple subjects teacher, and then I kind of made my way into PE and health. So what was your story like?
Yeah. Well, I should clarify a bit about kind of what my course is, health and wellness, because it's very distinct from PE and fitness, which is what I think is the coolest thing about this role is my school has a separate course that's just health and wellness, and students also take PE and fitness, and they get equal time in both subjects, as same amount of time that they get for math and English and science as well. So it was really important to the school to have middle school students taking a health and wellness course during one of the most difficult times in their lives, when they're going through puberty. There's so many big emotions. And so how do you feed yourself properly? How do you make sure you get enough sleep, manage stress, deal with, mental health and social media and technology and all of that? And how do we have healthy relationships? So all of those things students are learning in middle school around, the ages of 12, 13, 14, and they're really figuring out who they are. And so this course is really a way to kind of support students going through what many of us probably remember as just like an insane time. Like, what's happening to my body? Why am I having these thoughts? Like, suddenly, like, one moment I'm like super excited and happy, and the next I'm like so mad. And so how do you understand what's going on? And so that's what's interesting about the course, because I was really drawn to that aspect of health and wellness, even though I'm really love fitness and it takes up a huge part of my life. I think that a lot of times there's kind of an overemphasis on the fitness side in schools, without much attention given to the other aspects of wellness. So just kind of wanted to clarify that. And a lot of this course has been, that I've designed at this school, has really been inspired by kind of my own needs personally as a human dealing with the educational landscape in the US. And having started as an English teacher working in South Central LA, I began through Teach for America, which is a program that works with new teachers, supporting new teachers to work in schools across the US, rural and urban districts. And they're often felt to be like this push to just keep moving up the educational ladder. Like, okay, you're going to teach for a few years and then you should get ready for administration. And there's really, really high expectations on your performance, as there should be, but to a point where I felt I was working 80 hours a week. Like, I wasn't taking time for myself. I felt like I was in just a very, very high stress environment. And I moved into different positions in education and found that like the amount of stress and lack of self-care for teachers in a profession that really promotes, going above and beyond, self-sacrifice, and a lot of like unpaid emotional labor, a lot of things that come from being in, a female dominated industry. And I felt like I was getting kind of ill. Like, I didn't feel happy. I felt stressed all the time. I had a hard time sleeping. And I developed like a binge eating disorder. When you knew me, like, you wouldn't have been aware of this, but that was something that I was dealing with pretty severely when I was living in LA and working kind of in that educational industry. And so, combined with like what I was going through, and then also thinking, if teachers and staff are dealing with this, like, how are students feeling? All this pressure on standardized testing, arts and fitness classes getting taken away, and budget cuts and things like that. All of the things that are important and that like bring joy and help kids manage stress and manage their emotions and understand themselves. A lot of that was getting deprioritized. And so it just became clear, like, what are we doing? Like, students need, that social emotional support. They need to know how to develop healthy habits at a time when they're growing and developing and really building habits for life. So I started looking at like, what could I do for myself to develop my skills? And so I actually did an online health coaching program, which was more for me, kind of supporting me and what I was going through. And then just sort of started building my knowledge kind of informally. And I had done this like right after I graduated with a master's degree from Harvard in literacy coaching, thinking I'm going to be a literacy coach.
Literacy coach extraordinaire.
I have this degree from Harvard and that I'm going to have to use. And then as I started looking at health coaching and thinking and seeing that there was this demand out there, like people contacting me just for things I was posting on Instagram, and I really wasn't even trying to sell myself. It's like, wow, there's really a need here, and we need to start a lot earlier with this. And so I was lucky to find a position in LA that was sort of like a bridge role in education, where part-time I was teaching health and fitness, and part-time I was dubbed like a learning specialist, where I differentiated for, newcomer English speakers to like really accelerated learners, and just did a lot of small group support there. And so that kind of helped give me this experience to then be able to say, hey, I could build a health and wellness program. I have lots of experience designing curriculum and teaching. And I was feeling like I really need to get out of the US again and travel. And the only way I seem to do that in my life is if I move out of the US and surround myself with people who have that as their lifestyle. And I just feel so lucky that I found this position in Peru, in a Spanish-speaking country, to be able to start their first health and wellness course. So it's kind of like a long story that goes all over the place, but so much of like my life experience and my professional and personal both really influenced how I got where I am now.
I love that. So when you found this position, did you find a school that was advertising, we're looking for a wellness position, or did you kind of just reach out and kind of pitch them on what you're doing?
So I actually saw that the school had posted the position, and I was really just researching. I'd heard about international schools, and I knew I had taught English abroad in the past. Like I lived in Korea for a year, shortly after my first stint in LA teaching, and I'd heard about international schools. I wasn't quite sure what they were, but I was like, let me Google and see what's out there. And I just started searching for schools in South America because I thought that would be a great place to live. And this school was advertising health and wellness, and they had not actually had this course before. So they were really looking for somebody who had experience in designing curriculum, designing courses, which I'd always done in the past as an English teacher, but also with my background in health coaching. It was a really good fit. So that's what brought me here, and I stayed for 6 years.
Wow. Oh my gosh, that's so wild. So what is it like, because I have zero experience in this, teaching in a different country, especially in the area of wellness, because I only know wellness here. And as you were saying, like you pointed out, it's not a priority. Like here, like my designation is like a PE class, like that's what it is. But on my own, I've kind of created my own curriculum to weave in other things. But the thing that makes it challenging is that there's not enough time to do both justice, So it's like, okay, my priority is like, I want to teach you how to lift weights, but I also want to teach you this and nutrition and this. So it's like, I have to like weave it in throughout the year. And it's usually like bite-sized chunks because I only have so much time with them. It's not a standalone course here in the U.S. Well, at least in California, they have 2 years of health class in, no. I'm wrong. It's 2 years of PE and one semester of a health class. So they only have to do one semester of a health class, and they do it in 7th grade and 9th grade. So, I mean, the rest of the time, there's no health discussion unless it happens in the PE class. So I'm so curious, what is it like, at least in your experience, or what have you noticed in other schools about the prioritization of health and wellness?
Yeah, and it's really interesting. And then the other thing that's also really interesting to see is I think in California, mostly science teachers teach the health course, and some states PE teachers. And so it's really interesting to see how school districts view health and wellness and where it's situated. And I think the course that I teach is just so unique because I actually spent spend a lot of time with the counselors in designing the program. So it's a very sort of separate department on its own and doesn't quite fit with PE, doesn't quite fit with science. But I think that my students, like the school where I teach, the majority of the students come from a very high socioeconomical background. And I think that that is one thing that's really important to recognize, because there's definitely a bigger budget for having this course. And there is a huge emphasis on, arts and fitness and activities. As I mentioned, like each of those courses get equal weight. But I think that the school is finding that students are really struggling. We know from the pandemic that their mental health, especially in adolescents and teenagers, has just declined tremendously. And so there's very much an urgent need for this type of course. And I see, like, when I look at the standards in California and Washington, I see that there are standards and a desire to teach a comprehensive health program, but schools are not generally fitting it into their curriculum, because I think there is so much emphasis on testing, standardized testing, without understanding that in order for students to perform well in those areas, they need to be well mentally and physically and emotionally. And so there is that big disconnect there. I'm seeing, like, around the world, more and more schools asking for this kind of course. The school where I'm going, the school where I'm going in Shanghai actually inspired the course that I'm teaching now. So they've had their program for about 15 years. And so theirs is much more established, and there's quite a difference between where I am here in Peru and what they offer there, and probably what's taught in California. And I think that the culture and the country definitely influences the kind of content that's taught. In Shanghai, it's going to be more progressive. There's going to be more focus on sex education, gender identity, sexual orientation, whereas I don't teach any of that here, because even though we are like a private American influenced school, this is a very, very Catholic country. And so little by little, I've been trying to integrate more and more of that. And one interesting thing that's come out of the pandemic is students spend so much time on social media. And so they are teaching themselves a lot of things that now we're realizing, okay, maybe we do need to be talking about this in school. Like, students are starting to understand their own identities in a different way than they've been taught in this culture at times. And so that dynamic has been really fascinating. But also, Peru has, Peru is the origin of quinoa and chia seeds and maca and a number of what we call superfoods and spend a lot of money for in the US. And so there's just like an unlimited amount of healthy options, food options, and whole foods. And those kind of foods are really, really cheap compared to a lot of processed food options that many Americans find to be the more affordable option. And so there is an opportunity to access a lot of fresh, healthy foods. And so that makes a huge difference in how you can talk about nutrition and teach about nutrition by what's available. And so I think, like, a huge difference is, private versus public school and what students have access to. And so really taking that into consideration. And what I think about here is, like, my students are going to have so much power and privilege and influence on their culture and on their country. And if they are demanding that structures and systems be more mentally and emotionally sustainable, then that is going to affect the country as a whole. And so I feel like I am working with a population with a tremendous amount of privilege and power, and hope that that influences how they view who has access to what health opportunities, who has access to green spaces. We'll look at maps, and we'll look at, what kind of supermarkets or markets are available and why. And really thinking about who gets to be healthy. That's kind of a core question that we explore throughout my class.
I love that. And it's interesting because that's a conversation I've had recently with my students when we kind of look at like, hey, like look at a certain grocery store, for example. Like, where do you see this? What kind of areas do you see this affluent store? Do you see it available in these areas? No. So it is really interesting. And I think it's important that you kind of pointed out the dynamics of like these people are, these future students are going to have influence. So hopefully if they are learning these things and you're teaching them about like how can we make things better for other people, the larger population, they'll take that with them when it's their turn, to start making decisions and choices. That's so interesting. Yeah, I think you kind of nailed it when you were talking about just, I don't think America prioritizes health and fitness. Like we prioritize, uh, what would you say, like pharma and, and other things that, it's like sickness, I feel like is more of a thing. Like that's what we're handling. And it's not the other way around. Like it hasn't been a priority in school. I remember when I was teaching too, like physical education was the closest we had to like health education. And when I started teaching, they kind of started doing away with PE teacher positions. And I was like, okay, so now you have people who have only had like this much physical education in their teacher program now expected to be the people that deliver this information. Just like you were saying, like the science teachers are the ones mostly in California that do it. And, I've talked firsthand with some teachers who said like, I'm not super comfortable. Like, yes, the more sciencey aspects, but in terms of like the lifestyle stuff, they're like, I don't even do that for myself. Like, and now I'm supposed to like teach people how to do it. And it is interesting because it's like, we don't have universal health care. We talk about all this stuff, but it's like, do we really want to be healthy as a country? Because we're not doing a good job of teaching people how to, and it's definitely not equitable.
Yeah. I mean, that question is huge. Like, do we
Yes.
even want people to be healthy?
Mm-hmm.
And who benefits when we're not healthy, right?
Yeah. And I've worked I know you're in another country. I've worked in different parts of LA, and I've, been at more affluent schools and not affluent schools. And you could see the disparity among like the foods that the kids bring, how they're acting, what they're nourishing their bodies with, what they know, their experiences. And it's drastic. And you're like, oh my gosh, like this is all connected. Like it's all part of it. Like you could see it, you know? What are some of the things that you've kind of noticed in your experience teaching wellness in other countries that would benefit us here in the US?
Well, it's interesting. Like here, I live in a culture now that is super, super focused on relationships. And I think that a lot of times, this idea of self-care and what are we doing for ourselves? How are we managing that's sort of become like the American mantra. And being in a culture that is much more community focused, relational, um, it's super family connections are really strong and friend connections are really strong. And so recognizing how that is such an important part to social emotional well-being is really, really interesting because I don't think that's emphasized enough in the US. We're always thinking about, what's our schedule like? What do I need to do to take care of me? And I'm making sure that everybody around me as well is healthy as well. I think that other thing is like, there's been so much news about parent demand in the US for having certain things included in schools and certain things excluded in schools that it would be really great to empower parents to demand this kind of education at their schools as well, because I think one of the reasons the program that I teach has been so successful is because parents love it. They think it is amazing. Wow. They want it. And they constantly mention like, oh, it would have been amazing if I had this when I was in school. Like, I really, really need this. And sometimes in parent-teacher conferences, I have parents starting to talk to me about their own nutrition and what they should be doing. And because there's such a desire to learn, and they want to promote those healthy habits at home. And so they say that they're learning a lot from the course as well. And so I think that the parent power behind it is really important. And I think a lot of parents don't realize, the kind of things that they can ask for and demand. And I think it would be really amazing to kind of encourage them to speak up more, to have that kind of access for their kids as well.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like, especially here in the US, you're seeing all these crazy things about banning books and and instead, we're not adding stuff, It's like the stuff that would really help, like more classes about mental health and well being, more classes on health and nutrition. I started a weightlifting program at my school because I would work with adults and they would say, I wish I learned this in school. And I was like, I'm
Yeah.
going to do it then, And so it's wild to me that it's like, you're right. Like it does come with that parents, like we want to empower you to think about like what you wish you learned and like go talk to your school, go talk to other parents and be like, hey, can we get a program? Can we like raise some funds and like bring a teacher on to teach this once a week, a couple times a week? Like let's build a program. It is, parents have a lot of power and I think this kind of stuff is going to be necessary in the future. And if we just keep pushing it away, like you're going to just see it affect different parts of everyone's life and future. And I love that parents where you are in Peru are wanting that because we are in a bubble. Like I'm over here in my bubble. I'm in my like city bubble, my state bubble. So it's good for me to start branching out. And I've been branching out and talking to different teachers in different states. And now I'm like trying to talk to different teachers in different countries and like learn more about like what's it like over there. And when I hear you talk about it, I'm like, oh, this is so cool. Like I want space to do this too at my school. Like how can we do this? How can we get more of this?
Mm-hmm. And what you've been doing is awesome. I mean, the program that you
Thank
have
you.
developed is so unique, so needed, and it looks like you've kind of done it in a grassroots way. You decided there's a need here, so I'm going to make it happen. Like, so how do you scale what you've done, for something like a wellness program? And how do you develop sort of a network of teachers where they have the skills and the tools to kind of start building these kind of programs in their own schools?
I know. I feel like we both need to do that together, maybe. We need to like brainstorm because I feel like both of these together is like what so many schools are missing.
Well, it's funny because when my new school where I'm going to, they're like, okay, teachers are also going to be involved in other activities. What kind of things do you want to do? And I'm like, well, what Tiffany's doing probably.
Yes,
So
do it. We need weightlifting in Shanghai.
Yes,
I would love that. I would love that. Like it would be so cool. And like that's been, one of my priorities for next year. I've been really kind of advocating for myself to be, the wellness director at our school and really like carve out that position for myself a little more each year. So each year I've been like chipping away at it and like, trying to do more like parent education. And that's a big part of it too. It sounds like the parents where you are super invested into it. So like that's the next step for me is trying to build that like parent investment, because if they didn't grow up with it, if they don't do it personally in their lives, like it's going to go right over their head. But if we can start educating them, kind of like you were saying, when you had student conferences, parents were like kind of coming to you for advice now too. And it's like, there's definitely a need. It's just like, we just have to open some doors a little bit so they can see like, hey, this is helpful for you too. Like this is beneficial for your whole family,
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, definitely. So you have been, traveling and living solo. So I would love to know, what has that been like, traveling solo, living solo? And also it's funny because like here, it's spring break, like we do little local trips and stuff. And when you're on break, I'm like, oh my gosh, she's in this other country. She's doing all this cool stuff. Oh, wow. It's so cool. So what has that been like being, a solo teacher on different, breaks and trying different trips by yourself? Like it's so empowering to see.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, that's like one of the best parts of this lifestyle is international teaching is like a whole different world for teachers that aren't familiar with it or have never done it. it's just a different culture and it's a different world where teachers might spend anywhere from like 2 to 15 years in a different country and then find a role somewhere else. And you're just surrounded by people whose passions are travel, getting to know new cultures, and not afraid to like get out of their comfort zone and just explore. And I really started solo traveling. Like my first time was when I was living in Korea in 2006, and I went to the Philippines for like 10 days. And I was really nervous at first. And this was like when you carried around your Lonely Planet book, a thick travel guide, hopes that it was updated that year. And so you didn't have like much stuff on the internet. It was a lot more difficult. But now, everybody is connected and you can find everything online, so it's super easy. But I love solo traveling. Like, I feel that you meet so many more people when you're by yourself. Like, people are not intimidated to like approach you or include you. You're more likely to kind of talk to other people because you're alone. And I just love being on my own schedule. Like, I get to decide like where we go, when, and kind of build my own itinerary. And I get a lot of ideas from social media, honestly, and I just sort of follow accounts from different countries and then get inspired on places to go. And then maybe I'll know somebody there that I'll meet up with, but having that freedom is just amazing. And at first, maybe it feels a little scarier, especially as a woman, but I think that, you live in LA. I think Americans,
I know.
like, LA, like New York, I've lived there. Whenever my family's like, okay, well, be careful. I was like, I lived in New York. I lived in LA, and you never told me that then.
100%.
So I think that there's just this kind of, you don't know about the other place and you don't know what it's like. And we get a lot of stereotypes and images from the media that things are scary, but no, the world is like actually quite a welcoming place. And I encourage anybody to take a trip by themselves, like outside of the US. It's a life-changing growth experience.
Yeah, I've never done it. And that's why, like, when I see your post, I'm like, that is so cool. I know I have a couple of friends that have done it, but yeah, I've never done it. And I've been feeling like called for like a solo trip. So I'll have to get some more advice from you soon.
Definitely do it.
So you obviously, I've met you at a CrossFit gym. I know health and wellness is important to you. And you're also a busy educator, but what kind of habits have been important ones for you that have helped you keep this like sustainable, healthy lifestyle? What are some key habits that you're like, these need to get done because I'm my best self?
Yeah. I mean, it's been really hard in education. I think that for teachers, it can be really hard to find that balance. But I'm a wellness teacher, so I have to like walk the talk. I have to practice when I'm teaching. And every time I teach a unit, if I'm teaching about like managing emotions, like how our brain works and what happens when we're like overwhelmed and stressed, and what does our fight, flight, or freeze mode do? And I have to like check in with myself when I'm going into that mode as well and practice what I'm teaching students to do. And I think like for me, a big thing has also been to just change sort of the expectation on teachers, and no has become my favorite word. I'm going to
We love a no here.
Yes, I love it. I've been encouraging my colleagues to use that word more often because I think that has been my savior. And I've really started to set a lot of boundaries and limits that I think have been abused in the education system. So not responding to emails outside of work hours, not working outside of work hours, which I know can be really challenging for some people, but also like being okay with good enough, which is something that I was never able to do before.
So hard. Same.
Stakes can be really high with what we're doing. I mean, some people might think, oh, you're a PE teacher, you're a health teacher. It's not that important. It's not math. It's not English. It's like, no, actually, these are like the most important life skills because they're going to get. But sometimes, like, what I'm doing has to be good enough for my own well-being. And so setting limits on myself on extra time that I might spend planning or grading, responding to emails, and also just trying to change the culture to
Yeah.
recognize that like we're not getting paid overtime. There's no industry
Yep.
that I can think of that's similar to this where you wouldn't get paid overtime or commission or some kind of huge bonuses that come from all the extra.
Yes. Where is my bonus? I would love one.
Exactly. So trying to like show what I think that in order for education to be sustainable, this is what we need to do. And
Yeah.
it's the system's responsibility to figure out if they need more staff and they need more hours, then they need to find it from more people.
Yeah. Totally. No, I definitely no has become one of my favorite words, and boundary setting, like the last, I would say like 2 years, I've like revamped my boundaries, and it has been a game changer. Game changer. Like I feel so much lighter. I have more space for things. And you mentioned like, things being good enough. And that was something that was so hard for me because there would be all these ideas in my head, lessons I wanted to teach. But then I was like, well, I have to put a presentation together. I have to put like a slide deck together and present these to the kids, and it has to look great. And then I was like, or I can just talk about it because that's going to take X amount of hours and I don't have those overtime hours. And I was like, here we are. Or like, I'm like, we're just writing notes. We're just throwing something together. And it didn't matter that it wasn't like this beautiful presentation. It was the content, and it was like my passion behind it and teaching them and the experience we had together learning it. And it's definitely been a game changer.
Yeah, and you just have to think like cost benefit analysis. Like if I'm going to put in all these extra hours, am I really going to get that much greater of a return from that versus just having like a conversation in class where kids can ask questions and you can just discuss. I think that a lot of times we put so much pressure to be perfect, and I avoid teachergram altogether. Like I know that that's a place that you can go, and I don't even want to approach that because I think that kind of comparison would be a little bit overwhelming, and
Yeah.
I think
And
I don't want to
it's,
praise that kind of overwork.
yeah, it's a lot. And I think about that too. I was like, wow, like how many hours is this taking? And it's interesting that you brought that up because this like semester, so like I would say January, I started finally putting out some lessons on Teachers Pay Teachers because I have had people reach out and they're like, hey, like I would love to do some of your lessons. And I had been putting it off for years because I was like, it has to be this gorgeous lesson. It has to
Yeah.
be, oh my gosh, like I have to do all this stuff. And I was like, I just need to do it. So I just sat there and I just literally took lessons that I did with my kids and like polished them up, put my branding in, because it's like, this is authentic. Like, this is what I'm doing. It's not a show. You know what I mean? Like, I was like, I'm not putting on a show. Like, I'm not going to go above and beyond. It's like, I'm giving you the basics so that you could just go do this, because that's what I need. Like, I'm not going to spend X amount of hours when, especially on Teachers Pay Teachers, like, we don't value ourselves enough as teachers, and they sell for like $2 a lesson. And it's like, I'm going to go spend like hours on this lesson, And so it's really interesting. And I mean, I feel like this could be like a whole nother podcast episode. Totally. But no, I love that. Boundaries, saying no, and like things can just be good, and that's okay,
Yes.
All right. So one question that I always ask my guests is, what advice would you give to your teenage self and teens today?
Yeah, I mean, I think like what I wish I had known about more when I was a teenager really was like mental health and dealing with major transitions. Like when I was in eighth grade, my mother and stepfather, who was kind of like my father, divorced, and I had to move to a new state and a new school and really struggled with a lot of mental health issues and just overwhelming emotions. And just like being able to recognize that, not that it's necessarily normal, but it's not uncommon. And there are ways to get support, and being able to identify those emotions, recognize those emotions, and just have some tools to deal with them, I think would be so, so crucial. And so just saying, yeah, you're going to feel big emotions and they will pass. And then like finding activities that you really like, and keep continuing to play as you grow up, I think is really important. And like where I am now in Peru, it tends to be a more kind of like machista patriarchal culture. And I think like when I think about what you're doing, and just girls specifically, like just reminding them that you belong in this space. You know, you belong in that part of the gym. You belong to this community of strong people. And so take up that space, because I've had to go to the park and see all of these like strong, fit men kind of taking over all of the like equipment at the parks, and I just have to like get in there and go.
Gotta get there. You gotta show them. You gotta show them.
We like, I belong here too.
Yes, I love that. We love taking up space. We are for it. And by the way, I love because we mentioned we met at a CrossFit gym, and I love that you found a gym community while you are, where you are. And it's so fun, like watching, and it is, I've said it before on another episode where I've told people like, hey, if you're moving somewhere new, joining a gym that has like a community, like whether it's CrossFit or not, but just a community type gym, that is the best way to make friends.
Totally, totally. And even when you're
Yeah.
traveling the world, like especially, that's the one great thing about CrossFit, is, you can just drop in anywhere. You can talk to people about getting, ideas for where to go from locals, and it's a great way to travel as well, is dropping into those places. But you're right, like finding that community is key.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Well, I am so excited for you to finish out this school year and get your move on. And you're moving in June, right?
Yeah, I'll be leaving here at the end of June and then heading to Shanghai end of July. I'll have a little bit of time in the US in between. So I'm looking forward to that before heading off. And then
That
we'll be
is
like
so awesome.
15 hours apart time wise.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Well, I cannot wait to hear all about your Shanghai adventures. Like once you're there for, a period of time, we'll have to do like a follow-up episode and hear what Shanghai is like, especially since you talked so highly about their program, and they are so lucky to have you. And I'm so excited that you are doing this and talking about this and sharing this with students. And I would love to connect more with you on this because I feel like we could do some cool stuff together too and combine
Definitely.
our passions together. Is there any way that we can support you, or where I can direct people to support you?
Well, I'm on Instagram. That's the main. I can really only handle like one social media. So my Instagram handle is mindful_nutrition. So mindful nutrition with underscore in between. And I need to get a little bit more active with my wellness postings on there. But would love to connect with people. And I love seeing what you're doing, Tiffany. So I'm probably going to be reaching out to you as a resource when I move as well.
Yes, definitely. Well, I love everything you're doing. I'm so happy to get to see you. I know it's been like since we did our Zoom, it's been like 2 or 3 years since I totally got to see you. And I know we will comment on each other's stories in DM, and I love that, and it warms my heart. But thank you so much for taking the time from Peru to chat with me. And I'm going to just be stalking you and looking at your Shanghai move and adventures. And I cannot wait to see what you are doing over there. So thank you for being here.
It was so great to connect. We'll stay in touch for sure.
All right, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We'll talk to you later. Bye.